Hello, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode, in which we will be documenting the notable similarities and noteworthy differences between Disney's 2021 hit film Encanto and Edgar Allan Poe's 1839 short story The Fall of the House of Usher. There are some interesting similarities in the story that could hint at possible outcomes for the family Madrigal down the line. I will be fully spoiling both stories, so if you've been too busy in the past year and still haven't gotten around to reading The Fall of the House of Usher, then you should beware of spoilers. That goes for Encanto too, like there's anybody yet who hasn't seen it. I only watched Encanto probably a couple of months ago by the time this video gets released, and I enjoyed it a good bit. But I always find myself pointing out that for some inextricable reason, the movie is surprisingly reminiscent of Edgar Allan Poe's famous short story entitled The Fall of the House of Usher. I kept thinking it over, and even ended up watching the movie again with my wife instead of just my nephew this time. And I couldn't help but continue to make connections in my mind during the days following my viewings. The similarities are not insubstantial and merit some discussion. I wouldn't say that Encanto is necessarily an intentional parody of Poe's short story, but I would be at least mildly surprised to learn that the writers of Encanto had never read it. For the sake of this video, as an all-encompassing experience, I am going to summarize the plots of both stories, starting with the easier of the two, The Fall of the House of Usher. Despite being a short story, the plotline itself is mildly complex, but with a small cast of characters and locations, the symbolism is where the depth comes from. Our narrator is called upon by his old friend Roderick Usher. He makes it a point that the Usher bloodline has been feeble for a long time now, implied to be as a result of incest. And now that Roderick and his sister are the last of his bloodline, Roderick is growing weary in his situation. He requests the narrator's presence. The narrator arrives, noticing that the house itself doesn't appear to be faring well, almost ready to topple, with subtle cracked foundations. Sometime soon after his arrival, Roderick's sister mysteriously passes away, and Roderick requests that the narrator help bury his sister under the house, so that the doctors, unable to explain the affliction that caused her death, will not desecrate her grave with some form of an autopsy on her cadaver. A couple days after this, wherein Roderick plays instruments and discusses various subjects, the narrator decides to read a book to him. Mysteriously, the sounds described in the book are reflected in the house with them. The protagonist assumes that he is simply imagining the vivid tale, but soon notices Roderick has essentially gone into a sort of stupor, rambling quietly to himself. When the narrator gets his attention, Roderick proclaims that he has been hearing these noises for days and believes that they may have mistakenly buried his sister alive. Too afraid of the notion, he dared not check to see if it was true. It became self-evident when the bloodied near corpse of his sister opens the door with the last of her strength, potentially out of revenge or confusion. She attacks Roderick with a final push, causing him to have a heart attack, and they both die. The house begins to crumble, and the protagonist runs outside to see the house turn completely to ruin. As its last two remaining members die, the House of the Usher family falls in a literal sense, but the House of the Usher line also falls to ruin, thus ending the fall of the House of Usher. For the sake of brevity, I'm excluding will-o-wisp-like occurrences and other parts in the middle of the story that hold less relevance to our topic today. Encanto is about a family known as the Madrigals that is supernaturally blessed with gifts that help their surrounding village in practical ways. Mirabel is the first child in the family not to receive a gift, which builds on the fact that one of their members has already disappeared due to the belief that his gift has a negative impact. This creates nervous tension for the whole family when it is the next kid, Antonio's, turn to receive a gift. To everyone's relief, the door solidifies for Antonio, and he receives the ability to communicate with animals. Abuela commends him in a way that implies that he has worth thanks to his ability. Mirabel, naturally upset by this, departs Antonio's room where everyone has gathered, to head to the main section of the house. She sees cracks forming in the walls, growing from the floor, and the candle that represents the miracle and is where their gifts come from looks like it will go out. She warns the family, everyone comes back, and the cracks are gone. The candle's fine, and nobody believes her. She investigates the situation by asking around. Eventually, she is led to the missing family member's room. He had the ability to have visions of the future and solidify the sand he used into a glass representation of the result. She finds the glass, and it implies that she is the cause of the cracks in the house. This is revealed to the rest of the family at a very inopportune time, causing the family to assume that a prospective husband to Mirabel's sister will no longer propose due to the possible instability now around the family. Mirabel is blamed, and she ends up noticing rats go through a secret passageway. She follows the passage and finds Bruno, the missing family member. Bruno agrees to do the vision, but he doesn't have enough space. Antonio, having been informed of the situation by the rats, offers his spacious room for the vision. Possibly due to the magic faltering or his out-of-practice state, Bruno's vision comes in out of order, and it leads the two to believe that she simply needs to hug the sister that she might have ruined the engagement for. Mirabel gives it a shot and ends up having a genuine moment with her sister after they both open up. This ends up making the candle brighter, clearly strengthening the miracle. Abuela is afraid of the implications of the oldest sister's actions spurred on by Mirabel, and they have a fight, causing the house to collapse. Mirabel blames herself and runs away. Everyone searches for her, but she is eventually found by Abuela, who explains why she sucks so much. And they hug and make up. The family has lost their powers and end up having to rely on the townspeople to rebuild their home. They let Mirabel put the doorknob on, and the house forms again, fully sentient. The power comes back, everybody is happy, except Dolores. The end. Let's start with the allegory that each story is built on, so to speak. The foundation of this comparison. Encanto's casita is a living thing that directly represents the state of the house. Here I mean the idea of a family, specifically the madrigals. Casita's condition is parallel to the current integrity of the relationship the family has with one another that the House of Madrigal consists of. The house appears fine, nothing is wrong, until Mirabel hears the line Abuela delivers to Antonio. Abuela informs Antonio that he now has a gift as special as he is, something that Mirabel, who has no granted gift, takes to heart, interpreting it to mean that she is not special and has no value. This leads Mirabel into her I Want song, Waiting for a Miracle. Mirabel describes in depth how she's always felt since the moment the door dissolved in front of her and she received no gift. After her I Want song, when Mirabel admits to herself that she's not okay with being treated as a tertiary family member, that's when the cracks form in the casita. Bruno's prediction that they were caused by her is accurate in that she is exasperating a problem with the way Abuela treats her family. She's consistently demeaning to Mirabel and asks her, much like her oldest sister Isabella, to stay out of the way. We're going to talk about Bruno soon, but for now, just be aware that his relationship with the family is another source of the cracks forming. Mirabel trying to make a positive difference causes strain on her relationships with Abuela, which results in the cracks in the foundation of the family and symbolically the house itself. This leads eventually to the destruction of the house when Mirabel and Abuela have a fight. Unfortunately not a fist fight, but the kind that hurts way worse instead. Thanks to Encanto's nature as a Disney film, nobody dies, and the destruction of the flawed foundation brings about change in a new foundation, not based strictly on the value of each member's gift, but rather on the family's love for one another, and the value of each individual. Something that would only be brought about through Mirabel's Nexus event. When the unnamed protagonist of The Fall of the House of Usher arrives, the foundation of the house is already sagging, though the house is personified as a living entity. Poe describes the house as having eye-like windows. The moaning of the house can be perceived more like an actual entity in pain. Roderick is a slight figure that has always had fragile nature, and his sister is allegedly just as poor off. It is implied by the story that Roderick and his twin sister are the result of a long line of incestuous relationships to keep the House of Usher pure. Due to the nature of inbreeding, it is likely that each generation has had fewer and fewer kids until now. Roderick and his sister are incapable of having even one, meaning that the house dies with them no matter what. And the house seems to be aware that the time is nearing. The literal house entity is only as healthy as the family members are, or the strength of the House of Usher, very similar to Casita. Once the family is broken, in both cases, the house collapses. The house is not held together by anything at all at that point. The cracks in the foundation are caused in both stories by relationships that the family members have with each other, just in different ways. In the House of Usher, we can assume the cracks have grown slightly more prominent as each generation has grown more unhealthy, hence the house is in such a poor state by the time the protagonists arrive. With only 2 sickly, infertile members left, the house is barely held together by the concept of Usher House, and is already preparing to fall. Both stories have the symbolic house being destroyed by unhealthy tendencies in their respective relationships, highlighting the long-term harm passed down through generations of these 2 very distinct families. Thankfully, Encanto is not proposing the problem as incest, it seems. In The Fall of the House of Usher, as well as Encanto, the foundation of the household is built on a flawed base that collapses in on itself when Rodric's sister attacks him, causing them both to die, and when Abuela verbally attacks Mirabel, causing a breakdown in the foundation of the family. Casita collapses. If you think about Encanto really carefully, you can realize that the conflict in the movie is actually entwined with Bruno. Half of the conflict is about the way the families treated Bruno, with the other half being about Mirabel. Both family members do not obviously benefit the Madrigals. To get back to what I brought up before, Bruno is possibly another cause of the cracks in the foundation of the house. The family's willingness to blame Bruno for so many different things that were probably out of his control entirely would definitely be indicative of a flawed relationship. If you pay attention to the process that Bruno has to go through to see the future, gathering enough sand in a large enough space, or going to the top of his tower where he is shown to have done the vision for Mirabel, which might just be because Abuela asked him to do it in private, but still. He focuses on the sand and then solidifies the vision for someone. It's not as easy as shooting plants out of the ground and takes some time to execute, meaning that he likely tended only to do it when someone requested it of him. In the song, We Don't Talk About Bruno, the phrasing the family uses is read. That terminology typically is used when referring to palm reading or tarot cards, because the person is directly involved with the process. They are being read somehow. Bruno isn't just doing this without their involvement, they are just getting this information and not liking what they're hearing. Bruno is shown to be an incredibly considerate person. Due to the fear of his power, he's become very superstitious to try and ward off any future he may have caused through bad luck. He's not trying to give people a bad future, they're just ungrateful for the power of knowledge. It's scary to know that bad things will happen to you. Naturally, bad things still happen to people without Bruno being involved. They just didn't know ahead of time. It's also possible that these futures are still in flux, but they become self-fulfilling prophecies. He tells the guy that he'll grow a gut, and he may have given up on eating whatever he wanted since he thought it was guaranteed. It's worth noting that we can't guarantee that he doesn't seal their fate, because some of the prophecies that could come true are broken or possibly altered during the time that they don't have powers. Dolores sings that he predicted the love of her life would be betrothed to another, but unless it doesn't work out with Mariano, and then this happens later, it looks like that does not come true. It's either because Bruno loses his powers for a time, or likely the X factor of Mirabel being able to help a person realize their potential. Mirabel helps her sister be true to herself so she never gets engaged to Mariano, and Dolores steps in. This means at least one of Bruno's predictions seems to never come true. At least, not within the context of the story. These predictions are never given a time frame, and interesting things like the fish deaths are an inevitability. Then there's the vision for Isabella. He predicts that she would have the life of her dreams, and indirectly that she would be happy. Now, we can't guarantee that this doesn't happen. My theory is that the life of her dreams, to not have to be perfect, is something she promises herself after her interactions with Mirabel. So it's possible that she was a factor all along. Importantly, the perfect life Abuela envisions comes under fire when people start to get upset with Bruno's visions. Bruno feels eventually that he's just better off disappearing, which is some serious instability and also incredibly sad. His deciding to live in the walls and secretly patch the cracks is an incredibly selfless thing to do, showing that Bruno was never a malicious actor, he just became demonized. Abuela never asked him to leave, but he felt it was necessary anyway to protect Mirabel and the family. A large component of the movie is about Bruno and his relationship with the family and Abuela. The problem started to become apparent with Bruno. The Fall of the House of Usher's protagonist is not the only person who the story is about either. The protagonist is not even named in the story. The story is really more about Roderick and his interactions with the world and his experience perceived from the perspective of the protagonists. Similar to the way Mirabel functions in the same way perceiving Bruno, the ramifications of his existence and disappearance, and the long-term implications that they have on Abuela and herself. Roderick is the point of the story, the last in a long line of Ushers. He is the subject about which the story is told. We perceive Bruno through Mirabel's eyes, and Roderick is similarly perceived through the narrator's eyes in the House of Usher. Another interesting parallel is Roderick's acuteness of the senses, as well as a strong superstition. He's superstitious like Bruno, but has something like an actual power similar to Dolores. The continual degradation of Roderick throughout the story appears to exasperate his unnatural sensitivity as well. Interestingly, the narrator does not seem to portray the young Roderick as having had this acuteness of the senses. In fact, the story points out that he's always been musically inclined, something that would not have been possible if he was afflicted with excessively sensitive hearing. This ability was something he developed with age, strongly paralleling the way that a Madrigal family member acquires their gift. There are strange coinciding tidbits about Roderick and a given member of the family Madrigal. That's quite a coincidence that Roderick would have such a strong tie to music when the Madrigal's family name literally means song for unaccompanied voices. Somewhat of a minor detail is that Roderick sings multiple times in the story and always sings alone, in unaccompanied voice, so to speak. As I have so delicately woven into every aspect of the script so far, with subtle hints and elusive nods, Madeline and Roderick are twins born of incest. Interestingly, they both live for roughly the exact same amount of time as well. Her collapse on top of him causes him to die of fright as she passes away at the same time, meaning that the twins exist for almost the exact same span of time. So, what is the significance of the twins passing away again? The twins seem to be incapable of having children due to their long line of inbreeding, and thus, as pointed out before, they will be the end of their line no matter what. We don't know for sure if one or both of them is infertile, but they aren't supposed to spread their genetics out regardless. It was an inevitability for the House of Usher to fall under this mindset. Thankfully, other than that weird joke from Camillo, there's no hints of incest in the Madrigal family. They are contained in a valley with a limited number of people, but there are people outside the family, so they can safely avoid incest. I don't want to claim that I've done a bunch of research for this, but I'm just going to say that certain YouTube channels are under the direct impression that the House of Madrigal will eventually be subject to incest. It is inevitable that the town would eventually be subject to some form of inbreeding. With only a limited amount of people in the valley with them, there would inevitably be some crossback in the family tree. It is distinctly possible that the House of Usher is signaling to us the inevitable end of the family Madrigal. It's fine if the house collapses, and there are healthy family members left to build it back up again, but if you're the last two sickly people in a long line, there's nothing to be done. A breakdown in the relationship between members that causes the collapse can't be recovered from in the case of the House of Usher. Maybe the family Madrigal will be fine for the next 100 years, but the end of the road they're on might just be the same as the House of Usher. I like to think that they would instead just spread beyond the valley before something like that should happen. Either way, the fall of the House of Usher signals what would be the likely outcome in the event that they don't. Thank you for watching this very serious interpretation of the fall of the House of Usher and how it relates to the future of the Madrigal family. The implications are startling and the stories have a lot of similarities between them. If you found this video interesting, then please leave a like down below and subscribe. If you have evidence that I missed to support the correlationship between the two stories, leave a comment down below. If you have counter-arguments to the comparison, then please keep it to yourself or phrase it very poorly so I can protect my ego. If you want to see more Disney theories, I have one about Cinderella right here just for you. Jesus loves you and so do I. Tune in next time, and goodbye.